Monstrous scandal. Unexpected bomb at Can Barça. FC Barcelona has just confirmed what we have feared for weeks. Fermín López is no longer a Blaugrana player and is leaving for Chelsea. Yes, you heard right, the golden promise of LAMINE. This boy who conquered the Camp Nou with his character, courage, and commitment will now wear blue, but not Barca's blue, the blue of the London team. And beware, cool at heart, because it doesn't end there. We are going to reveal all the keys to Fermín's departure, put Laporta in the spotlight, and expose the fans' anger toward the board. But first, let me tell you clearly, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because here, in this space, we defend the real Barça, the one of the people, and no one will silence us. If you want to be up to date on every Blaugrana bombshell and every truth that others don't tell, join us now, because this channel is your voice as a Cule. A departure that hurts, that breaks, that bleeds, because we're not talking about a simple transfer, we're talking about a Canterano who represented the Cule soul. Chelsea insisted, increased their offer, and ultimately, Joan Laporta, along with the sporting management, accepted. The millions speak, but the emotions scream. Today, Barca fans don't understand, don't accept, and don't forgive. Hansi Flick, freshly arrived with a mission to build a winning project, will see how his dressing room loses one of the players destined to make a difference in midfield in the next decade. Why was this decision made? What consequences does it trigger in the Blaugrana environment? Is Laporta betraying the fans or simply saving the club's economy? Stay with us because we will analyze all of this step by step in this script, which reveals one of the most controversial operations in recent years. From the early hours, media in Barcelona and London announced it. Barca accepted Chelsea's offer for Fermín López. Within minutes, the official statement arrived, and social media exploded. Tears from some, outrage from others, and the feeling that a bright future was being buried to satisfy the club's accounts. Chelsea had been courting Fermín for weeks. First, they tested the waters, then insisted, and finally, they made an offer impossible to ignore for a Barca drowning in red numbers. 60 million euros between fixed fees and variables. A sum that helps balance the books, eases tensions with financial fair play, but dynamites the fans' trust in the belief that the club still believes in its own players. Because Fermín wasn't just any Canterano. He was the reflection that there were still homegrown gladiators, capable of breaking matches with courage and talent. Fermín was that tireless engine, that spark in midfield, that bold boy who never hid, whether against Madrid or Bayern, and that's precisely why his departure hurt so much. The dressing room received the news with sadness. Hansi Flick had only worked with him for a few weeks, but he had already highlighted his commitment and sacrifice. He saw him as an important piece in the rotation, someone who could bring verticality and energy. Now, Flick finds himself with fewer options and a team that, while remaining competitive, loses freshness. The fans' reaction was immediate. The Camp Nou, though it hasn't yet had the chance to say goodbye to him on the pitch, has already roared on social media, debates, and forums. The words were harsh: betrayal, shame. Another Neymar. Laporta is selling the soul of Barca again, because this isn't just about money. The Cule understands there are problems, that the club is suffering financially, that the accounts need to be balanced for the league. The problem is the message. How can you convince people that a new era is arriving with Flick if the young players who generate the most excitement are sold to the first English buyer? The chants against Laporta have already begun to resonate in advance. The fans feel that part of their hope is being taken away. This isn't the first time the Barcelonismo has felt that economics are being prioritized over heart. And precisely, Fermín represented that connection, the guy who fought, who went on loan, who never gave up, and ended up shining in the first team. What's the point of LAMINE if, as soon as a gem appears, it's handed over to someone else? That's the painful and angry question many Cules are asking today. There's no doubt, the main target of this operation is just one person, Joan Laporta, the most charismatic president the club has had this century. The man who promised to save Barca from economic ashes is now cornered in the media. Laporta has always been a spectacular politician, capable of inspiring with vibrant speeches, of generating hope even in the darkest moments. But this departure exposes his contradictions. He talks about the future and the cantera, and at the same time, he authorizes the sale of one of the house's jewels. The Madrid media are rubbing their hands together. Today, they draw the line that Barca is weakened, that it needs to sell its young talents. The Catalan press is divided. Some justify the operation as inevitable. Others use it as ammunition to criticize the management. For the fans, however, there are no nuances. Laporta is under fire, and the Camp Nou, when the president appears again, could turn into a volcano of whistles. Hansi Flick is blameless in this story, but he is inevitably affected. The German coach arrived with calm and responsibility, aware of Barca's economic and sporting difficulties. With him, they sought discipline, order, and a new footballing identity. For Flick, Fermin was a precious piece, not a confirmed star, but an element that could make a difference and support the team in a brutal schedule. Now, Flick will have to recompose his strategy. Losing Fermin also means losing dynamism and creativity in the second line. The German publicly asks for calm. His style has always been discreet, without fueling controversies, but behind closed doors, he surely demands, if Fermin leaves, bring me guarantees, because no elite coach wants to start a project weakened in enthusiasm. Another part of the story is Chelsea. A Chelsea that, for some time now, has been probing the market, knowing that in La Liga, the books don't balance, knowing that Barca is a vulnerable giant. London strikes when it hurts the most. They take Fermin at the worst moment and do so with arrogance, with economic muscle, with that English power that does so much damage to Spanish football. Chelsea isn't just taking a footballer, they're taking the soul of a fan base, and the Kules will never forget it. Here is the heart of the conflict, the eye of the storm, the economy. Since Laporta returned to the presidency, the discourse has always revolved around the crisis inherited from Bartomeu, the massive debt suffocating the club, the need to activate levers, sell assets, and mortgage future revenues to survive. That, we were told, was the price to pay to keep Barca in the elite. And now, after 2 years of juggling, this chapter with Fermin shows that the wound remains open, that little has changed in depth. The sale was not a whim, but an obligation. Barca needs liquidity to register transfers, to avoid breaching financial fair play, to avoid being stuck in a season full of restrictions. Fermin thus becomes an economic sacrifice. This is where the great controversy arises. What weighs more, identity or finances? What is worth more, a young Cantera symbol with years of football in his boots or a check that fills temporary holes? Laporta's defenders argue that it was impossible to refuse such an offer. 60 million for a player who, while promising, was not yet established as an undisputed piece. In today's market, they say, it's a golden deal. But the detractors strike hard. What if Fermin explodes in the Premier League, and in 3 years we have to pay 150 million to buy back what was already ours? How much is the essence of Barca really worth? How much is the hope in the stands worth? The dilemma is not new. Modern football coexists with this eternal tension between love for the team and the coldness of numbers. Barca, a social club with over 100,000 socios, has always prided itself on being different, on prioritizing sentiment over the market. But today, those words ring hollow. Football Club Barcelona is experiencing a moment of extreme contradictions. On one hand, the arrival of Hansi Flick on the bench has sparked hope. The German, a Champions League winner with Bayern, a coach with international prestige, appeared at the Camp Nou as the promise of order, seriousness, and a return to competition with a clear plan after years of instability. Fans watched with enthusiasm as a demanding, disciplined, and ambitious coach could restore respect to a dressing room that had alternated between highs and lows. But just as that hope began to grow, the news of Fermin Lopez's sale fell like a bomb in the middle of pre-season, and the immediate consequence was an emotional fracture throughout Barcelonismo. Because an almost schizophrenic dilemma arises. How can you get excited about a project led by Flick if, at the same time, that same project starts by amputating itself? The stands want to believe in the future, but the club itself sends contradictory signals. This is the Barca of grandiloquent statements. Yes, the Barca of, we will never sell our young players, but also the Barca of levers, unexpected sales, and decisions that once again shatter trust. That's why the division is evident. There is an optimistic sector of fans who want to look to the future with hope. They trust Flick to make the most of LAMINE, YAMAL, Cubarsí, GAVI upon his return, PEDRI when he's fit, and that Fermin's departure will be a minor evil that allows strengthening other positions. This sector clings to the idea that with German discipline and Kuhl talent, the excitement will be maintained. But there is another sector, perhaps more visceral, that feels the project was born lame. It doesn't matter what Flick promises, it doesn't matter the order he brings, if, as soon as foreign money appears, the club loses its most cherished young players. This sector cannot see a future in a plan that contradicts in practice what it preaches in theory. They know Flick is serious, but they also know Flick can't work miracles if pieces are taken away from him. And if the inaugural message is, "We sold Fermin," how can you trust that something truly solid is being built? From this arises the paradox. Hope and crisis coexist in the same dressing room, in the same stands, among the same socios. One day, you sing about the hope in Flick's discipline, and the next, you shout in anger over the loss of the Cantera. The Cule, divided, torn between two opposing emotions, doesn't know whether to smile or cry. In this environment, doubts even arise within Barça itself. The dressing room, excited by the arrival of a serious coach, also feels the disappointment of losing a beloved teammate. What will the remaining young players think? What confidence can they have if they know that even a guy who was becoming an important piece ends up leaving at the first market move? The excitement of starting with Flick mixes with a silent poison, the uncertainty of knowing who will be next. This isn't the first time it's happened to Barça. After years of footballing and institutional crisis, when it seemed that Xavi's dawn was beginning as a symbol of identity, the blow of Messi's departure in 2021 came. Today, something similar. Just as Flick begins, a shock occurs that breaks the official narrative. That's why the Cules repeat the phrase, "Every time hope begins, the blow comes," and that's where chronic mistrust is born. Flick's project needs time, a clean environment, and total support, but the board, with the sale of Fermin, has cast an impossible-to-ignore shadow over it, because every sporting misstep, no matter how minor, will be accompanied by a chorus in the stands. Of course, Fermin is no longer here. And as Chelsea makes its new acquisition shine, the pressure on Barça will multiply. The division is not just between optimists and critics, it is at the very heart of the Cule. A fan can wake up full of hope watching LAMINE YAMAL develop and, at the same time, go to bed cursing the decision to sell Fermin. And this contradiction generates fatigue, because the fan wants clear emotions. Either we are building something solid, or we are patching things up again with excuses. This emotional tension translates into an environment that can become toxic if not managed, because hope needs faith. But faith is broken by betrayals. And although Flick has all the sporting respect, the environment will constantly remind him that the project was born with an open wound. Barça, in the end, is trapped between two opposing realities. The hope of Flick, the crisis of Fermin, a coin with two sides spinning non-stop in the mind of every Cule. A hope that wants to flourish but has been struck at the root. And all the while, the supporters watch, divided, wounded, wondering if this Barça is truly the beginning of a new era or just another attempt that will end up being devoured by its contradictions. The Barcelonista is a supporter who does not forget. They live with their heart exposed, are easily moved, vibrate with their team, but also remember the betrayals, the painful goodbyes, and the decisions that tore entire dreams apart. The sale of Fermin Lopez to Chelsea does not happen in a vacuum. It is not an isolated market event. It fits into a historical wound, a repeated pain that spans generations. Do people not remember the traitorous Portuguese, Luis Figo? That dark night in 2000, when the symbol of the team, the idol of the fans, crossed the forbidden line and put on the Real Madrid jersey. That day, the socio learned that even the most beloved could be torn away for money. The throwing of the infamous pig's head from the stands was not an isolated act of rage, but the representation of a collective feeling. Betrayal is not forgiven, and the wound never heals. Then came another monstrous blow. Neymar, the Brazilian, became the hope of a new triumphant cycle after the reign of Messi, Xavi, and Iniesta. But in 2017, when least expected, PSG arrived with its millions, and the Brazilian player left through the back door. The supporters felt that this team, which promised to dream for another decade, was being amputated. It didn't matter that Barça received 222 million. What mattered was that a symbol of the present and future was lost, that the MSN was broken, and the club was left naked in the face of the power of others. The memory of Thiago Alcantara also burns like a thorn embedded. A Canterano of excellent technical quality, destined to be the natural successor to Xavi, he left for Bayern for a derisory release clause of just 25 million in 2013, which for other teams might have been a simple transaction. For Barça, it was the perfect symptom of its institutional decline, the inability to retain and value its own talent while others celebrated this gift. And what about the other names that slipped away without glory, but with broken promises? Bellerin, Grimaldo, Mauro Icardi, Adama Traoré in his first departure, and even an Eric Garcia who ended up developing far away before having to return home. Each escape was a reminder that La Masia was no longer the safe harbor it had been in the golden days. Cule family, this is only the beginning. We have told the story, the operation, but now we will address what is hardest: the division of Barcelonismo, the memory of pain, and the future of our Canteranos. Here, the truth really hurts. So don't log off, and I ask you, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that your Cule voice is heard around the world. Because this channel is not sold-out press, this channel is not cheap rumor. Here, we are supporters like you, defending the colors against all odds. And now, just when it seemed that with Fermin Lopez things could be different, when his emergence was a sign that the Cantera still breathed hope, here comes this new blow. Fermin did not leave because he wanted to. It wasn't like Neymar, who sought leadership in another club, nor like Figo, who went to the enemy. Fermin left because Barça chose to sell him. That word, chose, is what hurts the supporter the most, because the Cule memory does not just remember the losses, but also the reasons. Figo chose money and white glory. Neymar chose Paris and an economic political project. Thiago chose minutes he wasn't given, but Fermin chose nothing. The club chose him as currency to balance the books. And that hurts more than the betrayal itself, because it means the wound comes from within. The memory of all these scars means that today, the Barcelonista feels like a victim of a pattern, an endless chain of missteps where the club repeats its mistakes. Each generation of Cules has its betrayal to tell. The elders cite Figo, the middle-aged, Neymar. The youngest will now say Fermin Lopez. History repeats itself, and the pain is passed down. And in a matter of minutes, Barça erases its wounds with titles, because even in Guardiola's best years, the stands never forgot what happened with Figo. Even with Messi lifting Champions Leagues, the memory of Neymar still hurt. And now, even if Flick achieves victories, even if the team is competitive, the void left by Fermin will remain in the collective memory as another scar added to the marked skin of this club. The Cule memory also knows that each loss of this kind sends a message to the world. Barça no longer chooses its own destiny, others choose it for them. Before, Canteranos dreamed of being eternal at the Camp Nou. Now, outside clubs dream of appropriating them by checkbook. And this loss of control is perhaps what erodes the essence of Barça the most. That's why, when we talk about Fermin's departure, we are not talking about a simple player leaving. We are talking about the reappearance of a ghost, the repetition of a trauma, the addition of a new chapter to the dark novel that Cules carry deep in their memory. And like any trauma, it does not heal easily. The pain of the supporters also transmits a message that reverberates around the world. Barça is no longer the guardian of its jewels, but a forced seller. And this stigma weakens the club's image, because before, Barça boasted that its Canteranos stayed here for their entire careers. Now, the world watches as one of the most promising projects crosses the channel to England and understands that any Blaugrana gem has the exit door open if a big check appears. And the most painful, without a doubt, is what the young supporter perceives, the child who dreamed of imitating Fermin, that child who played in the schoolyard with the hope of saying, "One day, I too will play for Barça like him." That dream is brutally shattered, because now the moral of the story is different. Even if you make it to Barça, you can leave at any moment. A dream broken at 10 years old hurts as much as a defeat in the Champions League. That's why we say that the sale of Fermin is a strategic mistake beyond the sporting aspect, because it undermines the foundations of the Cantera. It undermines the narrative that made Barça something different. Young players will no longer see the crest as a safe harbor, but as a springboard for business. And when that happens, Barça ceases to be eternal and becomes just another club. And if dreams no longer come true at Barça, then what remains of Barça, which boasted of being more than a club? Barça may have great presidents, world-renowned coaches, and stars who shine on the pitch, but what can never be silenced is the voice of its supporters. The Cule afición has always been the driving force and the critical conscience of the club. And after the announcement of Fermin Lopez's sale to Chelsea, that voice erupted like a volcano. Social media became a true battleground. From the very first moments, hashtags like #Laporta Dimission, #Ferminera, #Barça, and #Novendais La Masia flooded X, Instagram, and TikTok. Within hours, thousands and thousands of messages expressed rage, sadness, and a shared feeling. A piece of the Cule identity was being torn away. Powerful images were everywhere, photos of Fermin kissing the crest, accompanied by painful captions, "They took him from us. Another one gone." The truth is, Barça supporters have been accumulating frustrations for a long time. They have already suffered through Neymar's departure, the helplessness of losing key Champions League matches, and the broken promises of becoming dominant in Europe again. But there was always one refuge, one reason to hope: La Masia, the Cantera. Seeing a player like Fermin emerge with boldness and dominate European giants gave hope even in the darkest moments. That hope now feels betrayed. The Cule socio doesn't understand balance sheets or finances. The socio understands the jersey, understands pride, understands seeing a player on the field who embodies what it means to fight for Barça. Today, they feel that a dream was sold for English money. That's why the anger isn't staying online. There's already talk of protests at the Camp Nou, banners targeting Laporta, and whistles every time the president appears. What starts as scattered noise can turn into a roar that unsettles the board at every match. Barça supporters have shown before that they can be decisive. Popular pressure was key in forcing Bartomeu to resign during the biggest institutional crisis in the club's modern history. In the 80s, too, the stands were the stage for massive protests against presidents who eventually fell. Today, socios and supporters are once again showing they are not passive spectators, they are the guardians of the club. The general feeling is one of disbelief. Many Cules express the same idea. What's the point of developing talent if, at the first opportunity, we sell it? What's the use of La Masia if we don't benefit from it ourselves? This emotional blow may be the hardest for this board to manage. The supporter feels unheard, ignored, and Barça, a club of socios with a historic voice, cannot turn its back on its people without consequences. Even sectors of the fanbase are starting to organize, planning gatherings at the Ciutat Esportiva and the club's offices. It wouldn't be surprising to see banners like, "Laporta, this is not a club, it's a business," or, "Without Cantera, there is no Barça." There are already groups saying they want to fill the stadium surroundings with protest messages at the next home Liga matches. And beware, because supporters have long memories. People still remember how passionately they applauded Laporta's return in 2021, that promising speech of, "We will be great again." Today, those same stands that cheered him are starting to demand answers. The danger for the president isn't just losing popularity, it's creating an internal climate of division that fractures Barcelonismo at a time when unity is vital to overcoming the crisis. This afición that sings the Barça anthem at every match now sings with rage. We all know that an unhappy stand can become any leader's worst nightmare. Laporta, who came to power with the aura of a savior, now faces the relentless judgment of the Cule people. And that judgment isn't one with financial statements, but with symbols, with identity, with victories that reignite hope. The average Barça supporter, the father taking his son to the stadium for the first time, the grandfather who saw Cruyff, the young fan who barely knew Guardiola's Barça, shares the same anger: they took away a future idol. This collective pain beats like a drum, and when the Camp Nou roars, no communications director can stop it, because Barça's afición is not just an audience, it is the soul of the club. It's the one that pushed back against fear during magical Champions League nights. It's the one that resisted when the economy collapsed. It's the one that dreamed of Messi from childhood. And now, that soul shouts with force, "We don't want to be a selling club. We don't want to lose our footballing idols of tomorrow. We don't want any more betrayals." That's the situation. The afición has already spoken. It's speaking now and will speak even louder in the stands. It feels betrayed and won't rest until the board provides answers or until the team proves that, despite Fermin's departure, this Barça remains worthy of the crest it defends. Fermin Lopez's departure to Chelsea is more than just a transfer. It's an emotional earthquake, a deep wound, a blow to the identity of a club that has always prided itself on believing in its Cantera. Joan Laporta finds himself in the eye of the storm, pointed at, criticized, and cornered by his own supporters. Hansi Flick faces an even greater challenge: rebuilding a Barça that has lost not just a player, but a symbol. Now, the big question for Barcelonismo arises. Was this inevitable? Was this really the only possible way out? Are we doomed to see La Masia as a factory for the English market rather than the foundation of Barça's future? Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that, together, we can continue to reveal what others hide and defend the real Barça, the one of the people. And leave me your opinion in the comments. Do you think Laporta did the right thing by selling Fermin to save the economy, Or do you believe he made one of the gravest mistakes of his presidency?